it's Ash here today, coming at you with something a little bit different. Today I want to talk about 9 games that changed my life. These are games that were so important to me, and I'm already a nostalgic guy as is, so when I think about these games and I talk about these games, it brings back all those great emotions of growing up. Now, speaking of growing up, I grew up with my very first gaming system being Intellivision, kind of a competitor to Atari during the early 80s. Now, I don't know what my dad was thinking, but we weren't allowed to actually play it, so I used to watch my dad play games like this. That's right, Frogger. I used to watch my dad play Frogger and be so jealous that I wasn't old enough to play Intellivision yet. Little did I know that I would have plenty of great systems and games to play as I got older. My first system that I owned was the classic 8-bit NES, and my absolute favorite game for NES and number 1 on my list as most important games to me was Dragon Warrior, known as Dragon Quest in Japan. This was the first game that I ever truly fell in love with. Dragon Warrior, or Dragon Quest, paved the way for RPGs for decades to come. Created by the renowned Japanese game designer Yuji Horii, who later went on to help design Chrono Trigger, this classic genre staple combines compelling, even an emotional storyline with great old-school, grindy RPG gameplay. Players play as the Dragon Warrior, a descendant of the legendary warrior Erdrick, who has to rid the land of the evils of the Dragon Lord. It's a really fun game. I remember going over my best friend Zach's house, and boy, would we take this game way too seriously. It featured a battery pack which allowed us to actually save our progress, which came in handy as we would give each other homework to complete in this game. Hey, you have to get to level 20 by the end of the weekend in time for our next sleepover. Man, it was a lot of fun. That's why Dragon Warrior starts out this list as one of the most important games of my life. Number 2 on the list, we're gonna stick with NES here. It is Jackal. Released by Konami in 1986, Jackal is an overhead run-and-gun style shoot-'em-up where the player must maneuver an armed jeep in order to rescue prisoners of war trapped in enemy territory. The cool thing about Jackal, besides the airtight controls, stellar soundtrack, and interesting bosses and enemy variety throughout the course of 7 interesting levels, is that it can be played by 2 players in a simultaneous co-op mode. I remember my dad buying this game for us to play together, and boy did we have a lot of fun, spending countless nights blaming each other for our untimely deaths until we finally beat the game. Oh, what a great feeling. Third on the list, and last of the classic NES titles, is a second installment of the Castlevania series, Simon's Quest. The first and third games of this series were far more popular, and for many great reasons, but I've always had a soft spot in my heart for the ugly stepchild of the series. Simon's Quest was released by Konami in 1988 in the United States. The player returns to again take on the role of Simon Belmont, the vampire hunter who is on a journey to undo a curse placed upon him by Dracula at the end of the first game in the series. Simon must collect 5 parts of Dracula, return them to his castle, and defeat him again to remove the curse. The cool thing about Simon's Quest is that it departs from the original linear storyline and gameplay of Castlevania 1. It introduces non-linear gameplay, similar to Metroid, where players can complete the game in any order they choose for the most part, returning to locations to uncover objects that previously weren't there, meet new people, and solve mysteries that weren't there earlier in the game. It also introduced a lot of new RPG elements like gaining experience, getting better weapons, and a new night-day mode. I used to play this game with my next-door neighbor Christian, who was much older than me, and I can remember how seriously he took this game. He even had a notebook just detailing all the things he discovered in the game and helping him guide his way to Dracula. He even helped me organize a Castlevania-themed birthday when I was 9 years old. Overall, this is a classic title and underrated in my opinion, definitely one of my favorites. Alright Alright guys, now it's time to move on from Nintendo. During this period of my life, in the mid and late 90s, I started getting really involved in PC games. And the first game that I really took my attention was Age of Empires. Age of Empires franchise, which boasts 7 titles and 3 more spin-offs in total. AoE focused on events in Europe, Africa, and Asia, spanning from the Stone Age to the Iron Age. It's one of the first ever history-based real-time strategy games, taking inspiration from Warcraft 1 and Civilization and expanding upon them. The game gives players a choice of 12 civilizations to play, each with their unique strengths and weaknesses. I could have easily picked Age of Empires 2, Warcraft 2, Age of Mythology, StarCraft, or Command & Conquer, but I'm gonna go with the classic here, the original AoE. The truth is, I still love to play these games to this day. Multiplayer modes and even online modes were really a ton of fun, but so were the single-player campaigns, which were lengthy and also challenging. I absolutely loved wasting away an evening playing against friends online, or even making my own custom maps and scenarios. What a great time and what a great game. Next up is EverQuest. What can I say about EverQuest to give its impact on my life justice? EQ is perhaps one of the most important games in the history of MMORPGs, setting the table for the success of World of Warcraft years later. It received Game of the Year in 1999 and wildly surpassed subscriber expectations for many, many years after its release. As a matter of fact, EverQuest servers are still running to this very day, almost 20 years later. Developed by Sony Online Entertainment, EverQuest is a 3D world that allows players to create characters or avatars from a collection of dozens of races and classes. I got hooked, and by hooked I mean addicted to EQ back in 1999. I ended up losing quite a lot from this video game. Remember, in the 90s, the danger of video game addiction wasn't as apparent as it is now, and I was running on dial-up internet. I ended up losing a lot from EQ, and after it, I swore off all computer games. I ended up devoting years of my life to a game and lived more inside its fantasy world than in my own. I neglected my family, my relationships, and school. I ended up moving out, breaking up, and dropping out of college. The sick thing is, even thinking about those times now, I'm filled with euphoria inside. Just such amazing memories. Big, huge, 60 or 80 person raids, taking 12 hours just consuming my evenings. I know, it's pretty pathetic. I ended up progressing to one of the top guilds in the game, called Fire of Heaven on the Vishan server, playing a rogue and an enchanter. Ironically, my guild leader, Führer Plane Defiler, went on to become the creative director for World of Warcraft years later. So crazy how to this day I truly value the times and friendships I created in this game, even though it taught me a very valuable lesson to not let video games take priority over my real life. So moving on to number 6 on my list, I'm going to kind of take a sidestep in time, and during the time just before EverQuest, but right in my PC gaming days, I fell in love with GoldenEye. GoldenEye is a first-person shooter developed by Rare and released in 1997 on Nintendo 64. Players assume the role of British Secret Service agent James Bond as he fights to prevent a crime syndicate from using a satellite weapon against London to cause a global financial meltdown. This game was incredibly highly acclaimed by gaming media and fans alike and sold over 8 million copies worldwide, making it the 3rd best-selling Nintendo 64 game of all time, behind Mario 64 and Mario Kart. Multiplayer death mode for me was the reason this game makes my list. I spent years of my life every weekend going over my friend Matt's house playing 4-player GoldenEye with 3 friends until the wee hours of the morning. We had so much fun, and this game never got old. Never! It's considered one of the best shooting games of all time by many, and I 100% agree. Man, I loved GoldenEye, but you know what? Let's move on to the next first-person shooter that changed everything on the Xbox and then Xbox 360. Halo 2 is another first-person shooter released in 2004 by Bungie as a follow-up to the original, which was released in 2001. I loved both the original and also Halo 3 for Xbox 360. Halo 2 brought back the original installment's flair and everything that made it awesome, but they added so much more, including a cutting-edge Havoc physics programming engine to add previously unseen caliber of graphics and smooth, fluid gameplay. It also brought new weapons, vehicles, new multiplayer maps, and much more. On release, Halo 2 was the most popular game on Xbox Live, holding the rank for 2 years until Gears of War was released. Halo 2 is by far the best-selling first-gen Xbox game, boasting over 6 million copies sold in the US alone. The campaign mode did receive some criticism for its cliffhanger ending, but for me, it was the amazing multiplayer component that made this game what it was. I got into this game while working at a pizza joint, and my manager and friend Matt, after work, used to host these 16-player Halo and Halo 2 parties at his house. Every night, we'd lug over our televisions and our Xboxes, hook them all up together, and have huge death mode skirmishes lasting until early the next morning. Man, I loved those nights. Pizza in Halo 2, what could be better? The Halo franchise is absolutely amazing, and that's why it goes down as number 7 on my list of most important games. Alright guys, before we get to the final 2, just some quick honorable mentions of games that I played through, absolutely loved, but didn't include in my final list. So, Day of the Tentacle for PC, Hitman for Xbox, Goonies 2 for NES, Fable for Dreamcast, Mario Kart for N64, Mega Man 2 for NES, Final Fantasy VII for PlayStation, Legend of Zelda for NES, Prince of Persia for Xbox 360, and Warcraft 2 for PC. Now let's go ahead and move on to the final 2 games, both for mobile.
I don't know you, Big Buffet Boy 85, but if you think you can humiliate me and take my gold, think again. Oh, I'm coming for you with lots of barbarians and dragons. I can't wait to destroy your village while you beg for mercy, but you will get no mercy. I will have my revenge.
Clash of Clans is a mobile game developed and published by the Finnish company Supercell back in August of 2012. The game is set in a fantasy-themed world where the player is the chief of a village. You collect 3 main resources, gold, elixir, and dark elixir, in order to level up and become more powerful. Players can join clans, which represent groups of up to 50 players working together to progress, donate, and war against other clans. I started playing back in 2013 and quickly became hooked. I loved the grindiness of the game and the social aspects of it. It really harkened back to the early RPG days and then the MMO days, which I explained earlier in this video. The reason this game makes my list though is due mainly to the impact it had on my life. I started this YouTube channel covering Clash of Clans strategy back in 2014. About a year later, I got a lucky break when the community manager named Anna reached out to me to invite me to ClashCon in Finland, a celebration of Clash of Clans. Well, I attended, and now, almost 4 years later and 130 million views later, I wonder if I could have ever imagined where this game would end up taking me. I didn't get here just on Clash of Clans though, and that brings me to the last game on the list.
Clash Royale. It's not like biggest skeletons.
Last but certainly not least is Clash Royale. Clash Royale is a tower rush mobile game featuring real-time head-to-head matches. The objective is simple: take down your opponent's towers before they take down yours, or be the last man or woman standing. It actually took me a while to warm up to Clash Royale. I didn't find it immediately appealing, but now I play it more than any other game on the list or in the world. The sheer number of different decks, archetypes, and strategy reminded me a lot of my favorite non-video game, Magic: The Gathering, but that's another video for another day. Also developed by Supercell, I was lucky enough to get beta access of Clash Royale, and since then have traveled the world, casting, playing, and hosting events in 3 continents. I've also built my YouTube channel around bringing the best pro esport players on to talk about their gameplay, their decks, and their strategy. Alright guys, and with Clash Royale, that's going to conclude this video on the 9 most important games to me as a gamer in my life. I hope you enjoyed this. It's a little bit different from the normal content that I do here on CWA, but I'd like to do more of this in the future, so I just need some good topic ideas, or at least encouragement that you like the series and you want to see more top game lists, either retro or current games. I'm a big fan of them. So guys, huge shout out to Bren Chong, my YouTube partner, and to all of you guys for continuing to watch and support the channel. It really means the world to me, so thanks for watching, and as always, take care, guys.